Good evening and welcome to Hospitality Talks. This is Sam-Erik, and apologies, we were slightly late. We had some issues beyond our control, but I think we are now good to go. And let me welcome all panelists. And this is great. I'm excited. We have a great show. We have some great panelists joining our episode today. So let me hand it over to Abid to introduce our panelists, and let's start the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. I think your opening is very appropriate. We are all dealing with things that are not in our control, and that's what the entire episode is about. And again, our apologies to our viewers that are joining us on different platforms. Sometimes the best laid plans don't work out, and being nimble is the best way to go about it. I'd like to share a small corny joke, if I may. I've told this joke when I received my PhD, but three friends went to a hotel and there was a power outage. So they had to use a staircase as opposed to using the elevator. There were about 30 flights to go, and they said the way to go up might be that we all tell stories and time will go by fast. So the first person goes up 10 stories, he's telling the jokes and 10 flights, not a problem. The next person goes up another 10 flights, everybody's laughing, everybody's joking. Comes the third person term, they're 10 flights away from their floor, and the guy goes, well, look, you guys are not going to probably laugh at this, but the problem is I forgot to bring the key with us. So it's sometimes the best laid plan that they were telling each other jokes to get the time pass, unfortunately didn't work out. But thanks for being here. A lot of the markets are starting to open up. We are all talking about how best to do it, how to stay safe. There are talks about touchless initiatives that are going to be implemented in the industry, which is in itself contrary to what hospitality has taught us up until now. But we will get through it. For many, notion of travel today or going out to dine might seem terrifying. For some, masks are a source of comfort, while for the others, it creates anxiety. I can tell you myself, wearing a mask, I find it terribly hard to breathe in. And I keep constantly fiddling with that mask. Most recently, Qatar Airline, which is one of the world's best airlines, they announced that the flight attendants will wear PPE, which I'm not sure if it's going to gain confidence or put people at ease or otherwise. There are several predictions on travel as to how we will come out of it. There is a prediction that there will be period of renewed human connection after being locked up for a few months. Certainly, hotel industry is one of the ones that has been badly impacted, so we look forward to all that. Our panel is right in the thick of it. They are dealing with it day in and day out. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Mark Carrier first. Mark is president of BF Saul Group of Companies and heads up their hospitality group. Mark, welcome to Hospitality Talk.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I look forward to a good dialogue.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with us again while we attended to the tech issues. Mark, tell us, as an owner-operator where you have a portfolio of mostly franchise-branded hotels in upper upscale, select service, and luxury property that is soft-branded, tell us what this reopening plan looked like for you.
Well, it's a work in progress, in all honesty. Out of our 21 hotels within the Saul organization, BF Saul, we've kept 18 of them open. We've had 3 that were suspended operations. In the 18 that were open, needless to say, have been on very tight operating models which include in most locations, we were not allowed by governmental authorities to do food and beverage services. So we've been operating even large hotels without much more than our market areas in the lobbies, et cetera, for food service for our guests. We have become quite, well, bottom line is we think it's going to be a long road out in that we're going to be in an operating model that is quite constrained for an extended period of time. In fact, we're just doing projections through the end of the year now. And what is a projection worth? I don't honestly know, but it's you got to do it. And as we've looked through the end of the year, we don't really see meaningful change potentially until we get into the first quarter of next year. Discussions with clients, I had one this morning where they're not even bringing their people back to their corporate offices, and this is a major employer in Northern Virginia. They're going to bring 10% of them back in September, and then they're going to ramp it up until they get into next year where they think that they might get to an 80% level. So everything is going to need to be gradual. It's going to need to be calibrated to the demand level. We operate with 4 different brand families and multiple types of hotels within those brands. And we're operating right now in a way that's quite constrained. So we're going to bring it back one step at a time.
Terrific. And thanks for sharing that, Mark. And we'll get to market recovery. At least the initial indicators are, as slight as they might be, that there are encouraging indicators of hope. I guess if you look at some international markets, particularly in Asia, China ran very high occupancy, though it was all of domestic travel, more recently when they started to open up. So we hope that will happen. And there are other news within domestic U.S. for some demand in drive-by markets. So we'll get to that in a second. Mark, throughout this time period, how have you stayed in touch with the associates and your guests and corporate clients? How have you been communicating with them?
Well, we've maintained a core leadership group and sales group and our human resources team that has worked extremely aggressively to stay in touch with our clients and our team members. It's been a very challenging period of time. In fact, in my entire career, I've never done a furlough in my career until 2 months ago. And I would bet that's similar to many people where we just never had this kind of a economic shock to our overall performance. So it's been a very significant effort on our part through both direct phone calls, through digitally, through even direct mail to some extent with our team members to try to stay connected to the greatest extent we can. We believe wholeheartedly that we will come back out of this, and it will take some time. And our valued associates and clients are extremely important to us. So we've maintained both direct contact, one-on-one, verbally. We've done online videos and a range of different tools to try to reach out to each of our constituencies in multiple ways.
Fantastic. Is the general sentiment relatively positive? I guess as positive as it can be under the circumstances. What are these conversations telling you right now?
Well, I think everyone is dealing with incredible uncertainty where we can't really plan on the past assumptions for the future. So folks are dealing with that uncertainty because it's very, very challenging. It is for each of us, right? Never mind our team members who are hoping to be brought back to work. Our clients don't quite yet know what their own demand cycles are going to be. So in the face of all of that, we have a high degree of uncertainty. One of the elements that I speak to with our team a lot is we're going through a process here. We need to keep focused on the future, focused on those values and behaviors that we know are important to success, and recognize that while we have throttled down our operating model for now, we will bring it back. It's just a question of time, and it will be calibrated along with the return of demand.
Mark, you have partnerships with several brands.
Yes.
Each of the brands have rolled out initiatives relative to room cleanliness and,
Yes.
and what they're doing.
Yes.
Can you shed some light on how that is playing? And then I'm going to turn it over to Sam. But if you could help us understand brands' role in helping the reopening efforts, if you would.
Yes. First, I would like to recognize the brands that we do business with, which includes Hilton, Marriott, IHG. We have a Best Western, and I would say they've done a heck of a job too, as well as we affiliate with leading hotels of the world at the Hay Adams, and they've done a fine job. Each of these brand families have been very, very focused on promulgating policies, procedures, and programs so that we can provide confidence to our consumers that a hotel stay is safe, sanitary, secure for them. And I have to give them all a great deal of credit, and also the fact that they have worked in collaboration with their ownership councils that they have and reached out to owners. I also want to recognize what the AHLA, our National Trade Association, has done, because they have put together a nationwide program of cleaning and sanitation protocols, and they convened a whole range of stakeholders in that: brands, management companies, owners, operators, at all kinds of levels of the industry. And they've established a program also to promulgate to both operators as well as the public that staying at a hotel is a safe and great thing to do, frankly.
Superb. Sam, over to you.
Yes, Mark, that's very good too. Thank you very much for your input. I'm curious about how do you see the brands reaching out directly to the consumer to keep them abreast what they are doing, what the brands are doing in order to give the sense of safety and security when the customer is ready to book? What channels are they using? If you can just give some feel of how it works.
Well, what's interesting, Sam, is that as the demand for a hotel and travel in general has throttled down, our brand companies have throttled back their internet, digital advertising, et cetera, because they're, no sense spending money in an environment where, this is my perception anyway, that people just aren't traveling. They've done a tremendous amount of direct sales outreach. The brand companies in particular have ensured that their sales personnel, just like we have in our own company, are letting clients know that these are steps that they're taking. They've done a lot of PR-related efforts, and in particular, they communicate directly with their frequency program guests with a lot of information. So whether it's the Hilton program or IHG's or Marriott's, they have been directly reaching out to their most frequent travelers through their frequency programs, through internet and digital means to reach them and inform them what's going on. They have been very communicative with the franchise community and through a number of different ways. So I would honestly say, in combination with the Lodging Association, the brands have done a heck of a job very quickly when you think about it, because if you just look back 60 days ago, what were we all thinking and doing 75 days ago? And then where they are now, they've moved very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I mean, traditionally, hospitality or the hotel industry is seen as sort of the only the relying on the face-to-face, and has been a little bit uncomfortable of dealing online and using social media to communicate. But this Corona and the COVID-19 situation has really quickly throttled up that this is no other choice. This is the only way we can reach our customers now. And I think what you rightly say, that they have done a great job. I have another question. While airlines practicing social distancing by not selling the middle seats, do you expect them to adjust their pricing in order to make up for the revenue loss? I'm not asking you about the airline, but do you see on the hotel side that you're looking for the way when the demand comes up to look at the very higher price to make up for the loss of the revenues?
Well, very, very good question. But you know, we're very much a market-driven product, right?
Yeah.
All hotels are. We respond to what the market opportunities are. And I think that the challenge that we will all have is that various market segments will be much less than what we've experienced in the past several years, and that will create a downward pressure actually on rates as opposed to an upward pressure. We were already having challenges in our rate growth here, just speaking domestically, and as a result, our ability to price up is going to be very challenged. In some ways, we're working as owners very closely with the brands to ensure that what we do is mindful of the expense side of the equation too. But first and foremost, we have to take care of our guests, take care of our associates, and we understand that there's going to be costs associated with that. The best thing for our industry is to recharge the economic momentum of our country, and that will generate both leisure and business travel. That's what we really need, and a sense of security and safety is a key element of that.
Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Abid.
Mark, if you look at the different tracks of hotels, whether it's upper upscale, select service, do you have any sense, or are there any trends that you're seeing whether one type of hotel might perform better than the other?
Well, I think we can all read the Smith Travel data, and what it's showing is that the luxury upper upscale properties have been really the most impacted. In fact, I was just looking at the data that came across for the full month of April earlier in the day from Smith Travel. Was that yesterday? And the luxury is down 95%, right? When our industry is down just under 80%. The lower end of the segments, or the economy, the more roadside, let's call it, oriented properties are holding up better. The extended stay hotels are holding up better because they're more equipped with facilities that are responding to what the current demand is. Within our company, our extended stay properties, whether they're affiliated with Hilton or Marriott, are holding up better than the rest of the portfolio, simply because the very nature of their amenities and their general clientele has been more resilient through this challenge. The hotels that are more focused on business travel, those are the ones that we have had, business transient in particular, far greater challenges. Great hotels, perform really well in a normal environment, have really, really felt the deflation of corporate demand. So,
well, thank you for that, Mark. Please stay with us. There are lots of other questions. We'll get back to you, but that's a great segue to introduce our next guest, Ben Seidel, who is President and CEO of Real Hospitality Group. Welcome to Hospitality Talks, Ben. Ben, I think we've got you on mute.
I always tell people to watch the mute button, and it always happens.
Best laid plans. This is Murphy's Law, but welcome. Ben, as an operator of a wide portfolio of hotels that constitutes independents, branded hotels, different classifications. Tell us, what does recovery look like for you from your lens?
It varies. We've instructed all of our teams in the daily meetings that we have to watch the people. And what I mean by that is markets are opening up a little differently. A good example of that, Abid, but certainly not the only one, was last Thursday when the state of Wisconsin Supreme Court overruled the governor's stay-at-home order. Our bars were packed 2 hours after that stay-at-home order was lifted. In Maryland here, we're based in Ocean City as our corporate headquarters. We haven't been to our Wall Street office, obviously, in about 2 months now, and we miss our team there. But in Ocean City, the governor lifted our stay-at-home order last Thursday. We were 13% of the hotels that we had open in this city on Thursday night, and we sold every room we had on Friday and Saturday, and that's with no restaurants that are allowed to open. I think that speaks incredibly for the pent-up demand factor, coupled with good weather and obviously the temperatures warming. Following 2 months of being stuck in your household, I think that there's any incentive that people want is just the fact that they can get out. So it'd be interesting to watch. I'm very concerned about the convention and group market. As Mark mentioned, the luxury upper upscale group hotels, they're going to struggle. We're real concerned for our New York portfolio of when. Of all places, Times Square had our highest occupancies, right now have our lowest because of the tourism generation there that isn't there right now. But things are slowly starting to open up, I think, as people are getting more comfortable with the kind of the declines, the evening of the curve. The hospital systems seem to be, for the most part, okay. I think we dodged the bullet that some parts of New York and certainly other countries didn't. So I think that's a credit to us as the American public for reacting the way that we did.
Oh, thank you for that. I think that is very consistent with what we have heard from different markets again. So there is definitely pent-up demands, and there is hope that it will bounce. To what extent and how quickly and in what shape or form still remains to be seen. So we stay focused on that. Mark, tell us, during this time, how has the owner-operator relationship been like? I know all relationships are going to be challenged, whether it's lenders and owners and operators. Tell us what that has been like, and what kind of conversations are you having?
Is that for me?
Oh, yes. Ben. Oh, sorry, Ben. Forgive me, Ben.
I think it varies. We enjoy a very good relationship across the board, but obviously there are one-offs. I think it's important to realize that everybody right now is in survival mode. And Mark is absolutely right. The brands, while they did furlough a large percentage of their corporate teams, have been available. I know, at least to me and to my team. The interesting thing is that everybody's in survival mode, as I said. So we're all looking to cut costs. The owners, the operators, the brands, all of the institutions. And I think that, the current environment is a little scary to me. And what I mean by that is, while the brands have relaxed all of their standards, pretty much all of them, simply by saying that there's no brand standard audits that are going to go on this year, you've kind of taken away all the standards. And I think that's good. I think it's recognizing that we all need help and we need to lower our cost. But at the other end of the day, when we come out of this, we don't want to tarnish and we don't want to diminish what it means to be aligned with Hyatt or Marriott or Hilton or IHG or Best Western, who have it is. So as I said to Marriott in the conference call we had, is I'm not envious of their situation where they're in survival mode, we're in survival mode, and somehow we need to create that what we all signed on for each brand to be predominantly the loyalty programs and the frequent stay, because as we come out of this, that's the customer that's going to make the difference between who's got the occupancy and who doesn't, who's delivering the reservations, and who's out to travel again. As far as the owner-operator relationship, I think you're seeing some of those kind of get, there's a little bit of friction in the industry right now. I don't think it's that bad, but as we're talking about properties that stayed open, we've got payrolls that us as the manager typically are the employer. We rely on the funding from the owner and from the hotel to make those payrolls, to make those insurance premium payments. And with no revenue coming in, we're relying on our owner partners. In some cases, that's us, along with the limited partner, to make sure that those funds are there, because ultimately, who's on the hook for that? And I don't think any of us want to get to that if it means an employee missing a paycheck. And I think I speak for the three of us on the line here. We're not going to let that happen. We would never let that happen.
Do you think that the lenders are starting to work with the owners and developers in restructuring the debt? Are those active conversations? Are there initiatives that are put into place so that people will be able to survive this pandemic?
I'd say that, and I would welcome the feedback from my fellow panelists here. It seems to be very individualistic. The biggest issue, I think, that started conversations with lenders was the PPP program and those that have CMBS loans and the recourse for accepting that, what is considered additional debt. Congress right now is starting to deal with that in a very positive way, having now understood through the efforts, as Mark pointed out, through the H&LA, bringing this to their attention. I personally had a conversation with former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, who helped write the CARES Act. And what was interesting is when I brought that up, his comment to me was, are you saying that the taxpayers bailed these guys out 10 years ago and this is what they're doing? And it took somebody like me, who's not in banking, to explain that this is part of the restructure of lending that led to that downfall. These are federal statutes that these lenders are just trying to comply with. In other words, the federal program with the PPP money is almost entrapping us that took advantage of CMBS loans, right, putting up more equity, but in return, non-recourse. And now you've just toggled us recourse if we do what you want us to do, which is keep our associates on the payroll. I think those issues are working out now. The brands have helped a lot. I don't think anybody has not released their restricted funds, whether it's FF&E reserves or what have you, and that's helped a lot. But there's no doubt we've got to get this economy going, or there's going to be significant conversations that has to be had with lenders. Those are just starting now. Yes. Some balance sheet lenders have come right out of the gate with 90-day deferrals, without forbearance and without rework. You got your CMBS lenders who just don't statutorily have that flexibility to do that. So while we're all talking negatively about these servicers, I just want to reiterate, and we do with our owners, they're only complying with the federal statutes that set up the CMBS program. So,
right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How do we gain consumer confidence through this process? I know we just talked about it with Mark, that a lot of the brands have launched these initiatives, but consumers have a lot of other touch points to go through, whether it's getting into a cab, getting to the airport, sitting in a plane, on and on and on and on. Any thoughts, Ben? How do we gain consumers' confidence that it will be okay?
We have to stop saying that we're cleaning our hotels. And I've said this to Marriott and to Hilton. We have to stop. Does everybody realize that the chemicals that we've been using since the beginning of time, through PG, Diversey, Ecolab, you name it, has always killed the coronavirus? It's always been 99% effective against these. We have always cleaned our hotels. What we're doing, I think, is creating a perception. So I think we need to stop using the word clean and start using the words like something like certified disinfected, or not calling our housekeepers anymore, but hygienists, or disinfectants, or something like that, and really kind of raising the profile of those people. I like the idea of what Hilton did a lot by sealing off the room. So that room is sealed, and once you go into that room, we make a commitment, nobody's going in that room until you check out. So there's your safety factor right there. How do we service that customer in a way that they remember us for? I have no idea. I mean, I'm smiling now, but if I were wearing my mask, you wouldn't even know it. And that's kind of frustrating too. But I'll tell you what makes me nervous, Abid, and nobody's talking about, is something that I know that we have to do, which is contact tracing. I don't know that anybody's talking about this yet, but as governments, cities, states, towns, whatever, are hiring and training and initiating this contact tracing, what do we do in our hotel when the health department local calls us and says, you had a guest, they tested positive, who all was there, and now theoretically you're under quarantine for 2 weeks.
Right.
Does that mean everybody in your hotel is under quarantine for 2 weeks? Do you have to close your hotel? Now there's a lot of testing now that wasn't before. So now it's not 2 weeks. It's go get a test. If you're negative, then everything is fine. But you do interrupt your operation. And then what happens is these contact tracers continue to evolve and the system gets to where it really needs to be. We could be, and again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any imagination, but how do we know that we're not going to get a phone call like that every day, every other day, every third day as this testing increases and as contact tracing increases? We're really opening up Pandora's box, and that kind of scares me a little bit, how we handle that.
Well, contact tracing has been talked about globally, not so much in U.S. terms because of the privacy laws and consumer laws. But as you know, in places like China, it is very much done. I was talking to somebody in Hong Kong yesterday. When you arrive at the airport, they give you a wristband and you have to download an app, and then you go and quarantine yourself for a little bit. But they will keep an eye on you to make sure that you stay healthy and the people that you come in contact with stay healthy. I believe New York has taken this on and they are working on it. I'm not entirely sure to what extent this is going to be, but this is truly a global initiative, or at least in US case, it needs to be talked about nationally for it to work. So very good point. We'll have to get some more people that are directly involved in either technology or regulatory issues to talk about that, because without vaccine, it is an issue and it needs to be monitored very, very, very closely. And there are going to be people that might play negatively amongst while we all having to deal with it. So great point. Thank you for that. What is your opinion, Ben? What business segment will come back sooner, and what is it that will have the longest lead time?
Definitely, I think it's a given that leisure, especially given the time of year, the leisure guests will be first, and to drive markets second. To get to the second part of your question, the obvious answer is the major cities and the conventions boxes, the meetings facilities are going to be the last. But again, looking at it as a glass half full, you look at some of these big boxes that are destination hotels for certain markets, whether it's Gaylord or whether it's the Grand Hyatt in XYZ city. Without a group base of 10, 20, 30, even 60%, do you open up? Smith Travel Research came out with a forecast, I believe it was like on April 6th or something, and we all, as hoteliers, looked at that and scratched our heads and said, what are they doing? I have a phone call with them directly after this to ask them, what in the world are you doing? I do not have a 300% RevPAR index increase at one hotel in New York, and next year I'll be looking at a 400% decrease, and so on and so forth. These numbers are making no sense whatsoever. But having said that, they forecasted a 15% drop in supply back on April 6th. And I would guesstimate that this has gone a lot longer than anybody would have thought when that forecast was done. And I would also argue that hotels with large convention spaces, with everything that's been canceled, those that are encumbered with collective bargaining agreements that make it extremely expensive to open the doors for your first 10%, much less getting upwards of 30, 40, 50%, is going to inhibit their ability to open. What does that mean to the remaining hotels that are open is a lack of supply that we haven't seen in years.
I think break-even analysis in itself is a challenging thing. In some instances, it might be more favorable not to open immediately and defer the opening. But that's a hotel by hotel conversation that I'm sure all of you are actively involved in. Sam, any questions that you might see? Anything that you would like to ask Ben?
Well, I'm just I like your very frank comments about the situation. You have independent and branded hotels in your portfolio, if I'm not mistaken. Can you comment on their performance and their approach to their future business, how they are dealing with this?
It varies market by market, Sam. We have several hotels. We have just under 100 that are open and operating, and we've closed some of those. The branded hotels, we wished we would have had open last weekend in certain markets that reopened and caught us a little off guard. But without the call centers and when you close the branded hotel, it's extremely organized the way they did it. Your reservation system is back open on the day that you anticipated your reopening date. And until then, all distribution channels were lined up and in sync, and you were either closed, you were either open. It was reported appropriately to Smith Travel Research for data and all that kind of stuff. Our independent properties were the ones that didn't close. Without brand standards, without frequent stay programs, just the reliance on OTAs is the biggest expense. It's funny because when you look at our portfolio, it was the independents that didn't close, and it was some of the branded properties that did close. As we're opening up, though, I think that the messaging that comes from the brands, as Mark was pointing out, is going to be key, starting with the frequent stay program. I think, and Mark, I would listen to your opinion, is that these frequent stay programs have never been more valuable to me as a franchisee than they are now, and that they're going to be for the balance of this year and all of next.
Right. I would agree. When you think of the overall traveling public that powers the RevPAR of our industry, it's the business traveler midweek that makes the difference, whether they're classified as a group or direct transient traveler. That is the fundamental driver of industry profitability for business class hotels. And the frequency programs have done a very good job of establishing connectivity to those guests. So the ability to market to them directly, as opposed to having to advertise, through the OTA process or through Google, et cetera, gives them, pipeline to those people that have stayed with us before. And so the energy that will go into that, and actually it's a lower cost channel to get directly to people that have already expressed an affinity for your hotels. And actually they have great data on who has stayed where and at what level and what timing and all of that. So the ability to get to them directly to help put the welcome mat out. But I will say that frequency programs don't create travel. They tend to create loyalty or affinity. What's going to create travel is that reopening of our economy and the desire and need for people to go out and get reconnected with their clients and with their colleagues to generate that demand, which then the frequency program helps shape towards different hotels.
And a dovetail on that, Mark, and Bashar, you're probably seeing it too, where these companies are being innovative. Nobody likes to let a good recession or good downturn get away, right? And they're coming up with these programs to turn these conferences into semi-virtual, all virtual now, but then semi-virtual, semi-in-person. And I think that's great for certain factors, Abid and Sam, like legal and accounting, where you need certain certifications and stuff, where you can do a virtual class and get credit for it. But I can tell you, senior leaders in this industry go to those conferences, not necessarily for the educational seminars. Most of us are the ones that speak on those panels. But when you've been in the industry for a few years, it's not that you're above that, but we go to those for a specific reason, and that is to meet and to shake hands and to talk, and that is not going to be replaced with virtual anything. And I think that we're going to see. Well, Mark, the HNLA put out the forum rescheduled dates, and I think I had it for about 10 seconds and I registered. So I can't wait to go.
In December, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. You have to able to meet and network with people, and that's really I can't wait to get out there myself.
Yeah. No question.
Yeah.
No question.
Well, there will definitely be a bit of virtual fatigue as well by the time this is all said and done. Quite candidly, all of us are glued to our cameras and monitors. But thank you for that, Ben. Stick around. There are other questions. We'll get right back to you. But let me bring in Bashar. Bashar is the president of Provenance Hotels, a portfolio of fabulous independent hotels. So Bashar, as an owner and operator of these independent hotels, tell us what this recovery looks like for you.
Truth be told, as you said, we're all kind of getting fatigued of these seminars, and I kind of wonder what authority do we have to talk about sort of COVID and all of that. There are much smarter people than me, certainly, that are telling us what's going to happen. To me, and I think to both Ben's and Mark's points about sort of forecasting, the only thing that's certain about any forecast today is that it's inaccurate. It will absolutely be 100% wrong. I think there's two things we're thinking about. One is there's the medical clearance, when the medical community says, okay, go. But beyond that, there's also the psychological clearance, because even if Fauci says, okay, travel, you may choose to travel. I may be more risk averse than you are and say, I'm not ready to travel yet. So I think until we see some definitive data, clearly the most important word in this conversation is vaccine. And, we were talking earlier, nobody leaves their house worried they're going to catch polio because we're vaccinated for it. Once we're vaccinated for COVID, I think our world is quote unquote forever changed, but I think in far less drastic ways than we think today. We are so in the thick of it today, and we are thinking the world has to change. The fact of the matter is, again, if there's a vaccine tomorrow and you are unequivocally have zero risk of catching this virus, are you really going to bring hand sanitizers everywhere? Are you really going to worry about contactless everything? So for us, we're sort of taking a wait and see approach a little bit. We did suspend operations early. Our states that we're in were concentrated in the Northwest, Washington and Oregon. They were pretty quick to sort of put the hammer down and really lock people in place, which has served us well, thankfully, for the health and welfare of our community. So we're kind of taking a wait and see approach. And I agree, I think it was Ben who said that ultimately, or maybe Mark, ultimately, we live and die by the road warriors, the Sunday through Thursday travelers. And certainly leisure is a good segment of our business. We like it, we enjoy it, but it's not what pays the bills. So we are kind of looking carefully at I'm in Portland, Oregon, so I have my global economic barometer is Nike. And, a multi-global, big company with lots of moving parts. And the minute they start moving is when I start feeling that, okay, this machine is starting to unclog. Now, the danger in that, though, is that, like, for example, Twitter has just said to their employees, you can now work from home forever. You don't have to come back to the office. Microsoft, you don't have to come back till the end of the year. Amazon, you don't have to come back till the end of the year. So for us, we're sort of thinking 2020 is a wash. Yeah, we'll see some leisure drive-to business. Although my view on the drive-to destinations is that if you live in Washington, D.C., Abid, like you do, you're not going to New York for a drive-to destination. You're going to go somewhere quiet, somewhere not congested. So I think, and most of our hotels are in urban settings, I think the drive-to idea is probably more for the leisure destinations. I don't think we're going to see people come into big cities. But again, the only thing I can tell you is that I have no idea. We're kind of taking it day by day, market by market. We think any realistic opening isn't going to happen before July, in some cases October, in some cases maybe not this year. If you have a convention hotel, I think, again, to Mark's or Ben's point about if you don't have the base business there, why would you open? So we're trying to be proactive, but we're also not worrying about things we can't control. And, we're just observing human behavior and how humans are behaving and when things will start moving again.
Well said. I mean, look, for that matter, even the scientists don't know how this virus is behaving, much less hotel industry and hospitality gurus trying to predict how to get this under control and how to get the consumer confidence. Having said that, as one of my old colleagues used to say, any bus will take you where if you don't know where you want to go. So these discussions are more in trying to identify a roadmap in the eventuality that we bounce back, and we will bounce back. There is no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure everybody concurs, we will bounce back. It's just a matter of picking these trends, and as small as they might be, on the way to make sure that we can attend to the consumer.
And part of this is obviously confidence. And, I wrote a piece for Forbes called Joy of Booking. And the idea is, if you know for a fact you're going to go somewhere in November today, you're uncertain whether you can travel or not, but if you were able to, you would go. I'm sort of call to action to say, go book that room now. Go kind of through the joy of booking a room online and book it. Because the more people that book, even though you may have to cancel last minute, then the burden is on us, obviously, to allow you to cancel without any drama, if you will. I think the more that we see people booking, the more confidence we hoteliers will have in the future and what's coming and be able to articulate what we might be able to do. Obviously, you're not going to travel unless you feel it's safe. But if we don't see any bookings, we're going to procrastinate opening, and it's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy all of a sudden. We're going to continue to sort of be stuck in this paralysis that we're in right now.
You know, hoteliers did change consumer behavior relative to booking patterns. All of a sudden, the booking patterns went way short because there were cancellation penalties, and consumer was waiting to see if there might be a better deal in the market, the OTAs and all the distribution channels that came about. Now, with the relaxed cancellation policies, there are people that are making speculative reservations. They might not go, but at least there is a desire to travel. Hopefully, by the time their travel dates come about, things would look better and they will actually partake in that trip. But some of these bookings, I would venture to say, are speculative today. Nonetheless, It will give us a pattern.
Right. And, you know, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, if we see bookings, now I'm excited and I'm starting to announce that I'm going to open. My colleagues will hear the same thing and they'll follow lead. I think there's a little bit of, and I think Ben was talking about sort of half full. I really do think at the end of the day, we have to be responsible citizens for ourselves, for our families, for our employees, for our communities, and not do things stupidly too prematurely. But we kind of have to get out of this Armageddon, the world is ending. There will be a vaccine. Absolutely, there will be a vaccine. And look, I don't want to underestimate what has happened to the lives lost and the families that have been affected forever. But if you think about statistics, we have 330 million people who live in the US. 80,000 people have died from this virus thus far. As a percentage, you have a better chance dying from being hit by lightning sitting in your office than dying from catching corona. Be responsible, be smart, protect yourselves and others, but we can't just be stuck like this forever. It just doesn't make any sense, again, based on statistics.
You're absolutely correct. Staying in perpetuity is clearly not the answer. And whilst there are very encouraging signs that a vaccine is around the corner, possibly faster than the world has ever seen a vaccine will be introduced, yet the world cannot wait for a vaccine to come out before we start to move. And that's the discussion. How do we stay safe? How do we conduct business responsibly, ethically, safely, to make sure that all of our stakeholders are looked after? But this bug is very unique in many ways, and quite candidly, a typical flu is symptomatic spread. This bug is asymptomatic spread. So whilst I am absolutely raring to go out, I am petrified not knowing whether I'm a carrier or am I going to get somebody else sick. Not even so much whether I would get sick or not, but I clearly do not want to get anybody else sick. And that, I think that creates a bit of an anxiety amongst people, whether it is just to go visit your siblings or it is to conduct business. You, as a civic responsibility, you're being more careful than you might have been ever in the past. But I think we will go past that. We'll go beyond it. We will come back. The travel will come back. So tell me, Bashar, what has your focus been during this pandemic? What has been keeping you busy?
I honestly think, and I'm to my delight, I think the word kindness has always existed in our vernacular and our vocabulary as an industry. I think what this incident, global incident, has taught us is how much more important this word is today and going forward. I think relationship building, I think we keep talking about social distancing. I say it is physical distancing that we want, not social distancing. We in fact should be closer socially together during this time than ever before, certainly physical distancing. So we have been really thinking about the idea of kindness up to your boss, sideways to your coworker, down to your employees, outward to your vendor and customer. And we've been working really hard on the idea of relationship building. And I'll give you a real life example. So clearly, like most of my colleagues, I'm sure most people on this call, we sent out a letter to our vendors that said, love you. Unfortunately, these are tough times for us as they are for you. We are not going to be able to make, current payments for the foreseeable future until we understand what the world holds. Our revenue went down to 0%. And sure, that's a blanket statement that's easy to hide behind. It's a letter you send, but when the guy who delivers you fish in Seattle, who literally has a small boat, goes out every day and comes back to you, who served you well for a long time, to whom you owe $2,000, and that $2,000 could make or break his future, which may be inconsequential to you. We certainly could have not taken the call. We certainly could have pointed him to the letter. We certainly could have sent him an email or shoved him away. And I think the idea of taking the time to take that person's call, listen to them, make the conscious decision to pay them, I think that's the kind of kindness I'm talking about. It's not just about guests and customers because you need them. It's about those who need you as well. So I will say, obviously, what's kept me up at night is our employee population and the trials and tribulations they're going through and the uncertainty they're going through. And, again, this is their livelihood. This is their families. This is their health insurance. There's a lot of factors, a lot more beyond profit, which seems to be sort of prevalent conversation here. So making sure we did right by them. We had to do the tough furlough or layoffs, but doing it right, doing it in a humane fashion, doing it with offering resources. Many of these people don't have access to computers, don't understand what unemployment is. So really taking the time to spend with them, vendors, reaching out to clients, not to try to pitch them on booking anything, but just to say, hey, we're checking in on you, we care for you, what can we do for you during this time? So we spent a lot of our time on the human connections in all directions. And I think those who do this during these times will get rewarded when you do need that customer, because they will happily take your call when everyone else is calling them for their business. You called them when you didn't need them. So when you need them, they will take their call.
I like that. I like exactly what you're saying, because it really reminds me when I look at how certain hotels are communicating, being proud of their cleaning, sanitation procedures. I think I would like to hear more at how we look after you type of sentences should be more about that than anything else.
Exactly. And I agree with Ben, by the way, about the idea of we clean think about this. We want to put things on our website that say, hey, our hotel is clean. Well, what was your hotel before clean? Look, historically, hotels have been cesspool of germs, right? They're always going to be. And no matter what I do, there is zero chance that I will 100% protect you from catching the virus from touching something, a doorknob, an elevator button, an Uber, door handle, on and on and on and on. I think we are a little overreacting, sort of for the sake of the consumer, right? We're having to overreact to give them the optical illusion that we're doing better. But if I was coming to one of your hotels and you wanted to convince me your hotel is germ-free and fully sanitized, says you, right? Unless there's a governmental authority or someone of authority that I trust that can tell me this hotel is in fact cleaned the right way or has the right standards for sanitation, I'm not going to believe you, because of course you're going to tell me that. How do I ever prove where I caught the virus? Was it in the Uber or was it at your hotel? So I think we're going to crazy measures to appease the customers. I'm thinking about it more subtly and logically. Like I'll give you an example. We often want to clean our lobbies after hours because we don't want the guests to interact with the customers. And I'm saying, you know what? Seeing a houseman or a housekeeper in the lobby while you're checking in, cleaning the lobby, that to me in and by itself is a reassurance that we are in fact going the extra mile to clean the hotel. And to Ben's point, I think that point is spot on. And I haven't heard it said before. Don't stop saying we're cleaning our hotels. Our hotels are clean. We're making it more visible to you now. We're making you see it as opposed to hiding it. Breaking down the walls that we built between the quote unquote back of the house and front of the house. Because I think when people come across a housekeeper, a room attendant across the hall and look her or him in the eyes, I think that in and by itself is comfort, as opposed to sticking a sign that says we're sanitized.
Absolutely.
And again, unless there is a system of sanitation like the restaurant grading system, how do I ever know it's actually really clean? So I think we will have to overreact a little for the sake of our consumer. I view all those things as optical illusions for the time being. Clearly, we have to take a higher standard of care. For now, we have to brag about it. And that, yes, in fact, do say our hotel is clean and maybe stick a Lysol sign in the lobby. I think this too shall pass and people will look past it.
I can see us giving people Clorox wipes as they check in as a welcome amenity, or a UV light. I hope we don't get to that, but quite candidly, some of it is going to have to be a bit exaggerated as we start to open up, just so that we are able to communicate to people. Now, all of the people on this panel are industry veterans, so some of this that we talk about, we take it for granted, but average consumer might or might not understand what goes on into the daily routine of taking care of them. Thank you for that. That was a fabulous.
And you know, I want to add the unintended consequence of all this is we're all going back towards single-use things now. So all of a sudden, we're going to save our health, but we're going to destroy the planet. I think we're going to an extreme. So we need to slow that. People are talking about one-time use key cards and this and that and the other. And we're trying to think again more proactively. So for example, you talked about the UV lights. You can buy a UV light box and stick the key cards in it and pull it out of the box with the purple light on and hand it over to someone that'll feel better about it rather than going to the single use thing immediately. Again, some things we will have to do that way, but I think everyone is jumping to the extreme for the optical illusion, causing unintended damage along the way.
I think it's going to have twofold. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and you are correct. Some of it is going to go the other way, which might be destructive. But sustainability, quite candidly, is coming up front and center as a result of this. Cities are having these conversations, how to make the cities healthier. So it's going to have these conversations on a wide spectrum of topics. I hope that we don't revert back to practices that the industry has had for a long time that might not have been conducive to the environment, and we can work around it in other ways. So fabulous point. Sam, any questions from you? Anything that you seeing online?
No, well, I get some feedback here, but it's more, I think a lot of people are observing here with how the discussion is going. But have you noticed this, here in Europe and also in Asia, we see that families with small children, that the husbands are moving into hotels so they can work from there during this time. Have you noticed any of that activity in the hotels that are open, that people are actually moving into hotels to work from there rather than staying in that home environment?
I've seen it as hotels trying to sell rooms, saying, okay, Sam, you've been at home for 2 months. You can't get anything done. You're fighting for quiet rooms. Come rent a hotel room for the day to use it as your office. I've seen some of that kind of marketing ploy, but I haven't seen anything else. I don't know about the other gentlemen if they've seen anything meaningful.
No, not really. So just anecdotally.
Yeah, it's like a marginal then. Yeah. And how about then? Also, there's a talk about that the boomer generation thinks that this 220 is really forget about traveling, and then you have the group who says, well, I'm not part of the risk group, so I'm going to go on adventure and try and continue my travel and try some new places. That this group of, for better words, called millennials or the younger generation, they have no fear about booking that flight and booking their hotel and to move on. Do you see that this group are continue to actually travel more than ever before?
I don't know about travel more. I think there's always going to be sort of the early adopters when things open back up that are going to be more risk tolerant than some. And I don't think, obviously, age certainly is a big factor, but I know a lot of 60-year-olds who don't care and want to move again. I think it'll be the early sort of trailblazers, as it were. I'm not seeing those guys travel today, and if they are, the numbers are minuscule, partly because of the airline and the lift and all of that. There's just not. And if you go to Paris today, so what? What are you going to do in Paris? It's all closed, right? Yeah. So there are other factors, but I think once we start shaking things up as we are right now, you'll see, largely driven by younger generations, the desire to move again and being willing to take on some calculated risks. But I haven't seen it in any real numbers.
Do you see any trends as a result of this, or enforcing about the food and beverage operating models, or leading to more health and different type of restaurant operations than as a result of how people are feeling as a result of this COVID?
I'm going to defer to Ben. He has a whole lot more hotels than I do. He probably has better perspective on that.
Ask the question again, Sam.
Well, the food and beverage operating models, they are traditionally the buffets. They are that has been the traditional way of serving breakfast in many hotels, the lunch buffets. There's obviously a shift in how the food and beverage will be operating now from now on. What are the changes and the changes you see, and also is there a change in maybe in the menu selection where people maybe the tastes are changing, where people are not only going for the comfort food but they're also looking for a healthier option?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you're talking about hotels by segment, I think it's different. Like, for example, the select service hotels. I don't know how we did this, but we always do it to ourselves as an industry, Sam. So since 2008, we've been on the longest economic recovery in this industry and most in history. And during that time, we've created so much, we're a victim of so much amenity creep that you wonder, now that we've had to stop and you can stop for a minute, breathe, and take a look backward, how is it that I could pay $89 for a room in Broken Arrow, Arizona, have my family of 4 there, and you have to feed me an all-you-can-eat breakfast palooza smorgasbord buffet until I could barely walk anymore. And then I got a full-service hotel next door that is at such a disadvantage that I'm either giving away free breakfast or I don't have any room night activity. I think this is a perfect opportunity to look at this and say, this is a grab-and-go concept now, and it needs to stay a grab-and-go concept and differentiate some of the swim lanes of all these new plethora of brands that emerged over the last 11 years and say a full-service hotel is where you go and you can get breakfast and you give me your credit card for that. And over here is where we give you a cup of coffee, a little grab-and-go to get you to that restaurant in the morning if you care to have breakfast. But to put the responsibility on us as hoteliers that own prototype 85-room Hampton Inns and encumber us to pay a $6 before labor hard cost per occupied room, breakfast all you can eat, I think is incredible. Yeah. I'm not a believer that buffets are over. We're hearing about it, and you think that it's common sense, but I think when you break it down from a food service perspective, a buffet can actually be perceived, to use Bashar's words, perceived as a safer way of distributing hot food. As long as there's an attendant there and you're not able to get close to it, the touch points are much more limited from the kitchen and bulk food out to the restaurant where you see the food being delivered to you. So I think that might be an overrated statement. Okay. And before you leave me to go to the next guy for a question, I just want to compliment the verbiage, the nomenclature of physical distancing versus social distancing. I think that is a huge. That's the first time I've ever heard that, and it's had an impact. Socially, we've been spending the last 2 months buying from big box stores and mail order, right? I just said at lunch today to my colleagues, I think that you use the word kindness, but I use the word genuine service, and I think it's the same thing, is going to be not only the key as we move out of this, but a huge opportunity that people are going to be looking for is that human, face-to-face, even if you're 6 feet away, to Bashar's point, but just kindness to be out again and be able to see people face to face and talk to people. Yeah.
Abid.
You know, Ben, it's funny. I say how I judge a good hotel, an authentic hotel, is if I walk in the lobby blindfolded and feel the warmth of your hospitality. You don't need to look at me. You don't need to talk to me. There's something about sort of the human warmth, whether it's from behind a mask or not, it doesn't really matter. And I think that ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen and reading credo cards and saying my name 3 times, those days are over. People now want to feel the hospitality, not have you read it from a checklist because you have to.
Yeah.
I think we're all that way. And that's a good point. I can walk in a hotel and I can tell if we're being considered to be the operator and not have an equity position in it, then I'm one of 100 different guys. And if I walk into a hotel and I already have a really good feel, I have to sit down and say, okay, what is it that I can really bring to this asset? I have to think about that. I'm not taking it just for the fee. But you're right. So many hotels you go into, you just feel like a number. It feels cold. It doesn't feel personal. And when you walk into a hotel that does have that, you feel it immediately as soon as you go through the door. You're right.
Great thoughts. And I'm going to ask this question to all 3 of you, but maybe I'll start with Mark. I don't know if you gentlemen have heard or are you utilizing this buy now, stay later bonds that the industry is using, where after a certain time period, it appreciates by 50%. If you paid now, in 60 days, it'll be, instead of 100, it'll be 150. Any thoughts on that? This question had been prompted to me earlier. Mark, over to you first.
Well, as a operator of largely branded hotels, we would support that, of course, if the brands were doing it. But for us to be able to distribute that to a clientele independently of the brand family would be, just a hard way to get its distribution out there to be any kind of meaningful impact item. I do want to just segue, and I'll let the other guys answer that question, but I do think a main point which aligns with my peers here is this, the biggest outcome of this whole thing so far, which we've all experienced, is this millions of people that are employed in our industry that have made it this our career. And whether it's a general manager, whether it's a room attendant, whether it's a culinary team member, all these folks that have been dependent upon our businesses to be their livelihood and their engagement and their profession, that's the biggest negative that I feel right now, and how we can re-energize the industry, which I know is going to only come with our guests feeling safe in traveling, or that their business is encouraging them to travel. So I'm certainly looking forward to those days, but if there's been a biggest impact challenge, it's been that for us, in recognizing that millions of people make our industry their livelihood, and the ability to bring them back to serve guests and to show that warmth and that humanity is the day we're all looking forward to.
Let me pose the same question to you, Bashar. Just a quick thought on, have you utilized this bond formation? Do you think there is value to it?
We have not. I think it's a novel idea, and I think it's a great way to offer help to the smaller operators, maybe, because I think the numbers aren't going to be meaningful enough. I see it being more relevant for restaurants because they need that little bit of juice to help them get through this period. I just don't know that there'll be the kind of numbers out of it that we would need to see. And I think to Ben's point, we're going to be pressured post-COVID to drop rates, to only add insult to injury and be selling sort of discounted. If cash flow is an important thing to you now and you think you can generate enough to save you to survive, okay, but otherwise, I haven't used it, I've seen it, and lots of my colleagues in my space have not utilized it.
Ben, your thoughts?
Well, I wish you would ask me before Bashar, because he just said what I would say. Unfortunately, though, where I disagree a little bit is these restaurants. The fact is we're really struggling in the hotel business, but Jesus, those guys, they are getting hammered. Abid and Sam and my colleagues here, we need to realize a lot of those guys aren't going to make it through this. So you can sell your coupons, but how do you redeem it,
Mm-hmm.
You need all we can to help those guys get open. COVID surcharges are starting to show up, and that leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. But quite honestly, I don't like labor surcharges. I don't like destination fees and all that, even though we do it. But that you kind of almost got to understand. These guys are hammered.
Yep.
Very true. And as a matter of fact, I was reading an article not too long ago. Their projections are that possibly 30% of these establishments might not make it through. It's really badly impacted. A question, Ben, and I'll ask you this. Define success as we start to reopen, and what tools are available to us that we can measure success?
Well, success is a number of things, obviously monetarily, and able to pay your mortgage and keep your staff and your lights on. But, we always view success, and anybody that knows me knows this by what people say about us. How did we react through this? Bashar, I love what you said, and we're the same way. We have owners, we have two, and so it's not many, that just ran and hid and had those last 2 weeks of payroll on us. It wasn't even an issue for me to think about. You have to pay that, whether it's out of your pocket or not. These people, we think our lives have been interrupted. These people are sitting home right now. And if it wasn't for the federal government's stepping in with these stipends over top of state unemployment, I don't even want to think about what would happen. Let's just all know that, as Sam said, hunkering down inside, sitting in your bedroom for another 2 months is not sustainable. This economy can't. So we can have all the conversation we want. this economy is going to get back because it has no choice to, or we may be answering and, well, we may all be speaking Cantonese or Hindi. We don't know when this is over if we don't get something going.
Right, fair enough. Mark, are you looking at success from a different lens, and are the old matrices that we've all used, the likes of SDR or other tools, are they still relevant?
Well, we're absolutely in an industry reset in a way that none of us have ever dealt with before, right? We normally are plus or minus 10%, we're either a hero or a failure. When you drop 80, 90%, I mean, that's just a complete reset, right? So I think there are tools there. There's emerging firms like Calibri Labs that has come out with tools that allow you to build off of past market segments and really develop a forward-looking forecast. Its relevance is greater than just going on your normal background. For us, success looks like rebuilding the business and employing as many of the team as we can, and recognizing that we're on a pathway that is driven by forces that are not self-driven. They are, in the best day, the industry reflects the economy of the country, right? The economy of the region, the power of the local demand. So our objective is to continue to meet our commitments to guests, to team members, to our lenders, to our vendors, get through the next 6 months with a solid team looking to build to the future. So I like to say to my team often, look to the future, what does success look like, then look back and build those steps that you need to take that will get you there, like any pathway. And for us, it's consistency, it's focus, and it's with some hope and optimism. And that's one part of it too, that it's been awfully difficult for the last 60 days to have, that kind of fun and encouraging atmosphere that we like to bring to our business, because it's a great business of people. And how do we re-energize that? How do we create opportunities for our team and for our people to understand that there is a brighter day ahead? And how do we encourage and create a positive sense of momentum? And it's pretty challenging reset period, but we will, get through, and it will be, people often say, are we going to get back to? No, we're not getting back. We're going forward, and what that future looks like, we'll create.
We approaching the end of this session. Unfortunately, we started out late, so I know your time is very precious. A last question, if I may throw it out to Bashar, and then I'll turn it to Sam if he has anything else. Any message that you would like to convey to the owners, guests, lenders, associates, Bashar, that is relevant at this point as we learn to live with COVID?
I think the overused "this too shall pass," I think we really need to start looking past it. This too, in fact, shall pass. And I think I posted something on social media the other day that showed sort of a graph of living today, ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs and roller coaster. And you look at your life continuum beginning to end, and it's sort of a steady line. And this period will be nothing but a blurb on that line. So we kind of have to get out of our own heads, get out of our own houses, start to look ahead. Back to the idea that I said, imagine wanting to go book a trip right now for November, getting on the computer, researching the hotels, looking at that destination will mentally transform you and hopefully inject some positive energy in you. I think, again, like Ben said, glass half full. This has been truly painful for all of us across the spectrum, and we just have to look past it and move on. In our society, in our economy, one of our greatest abilities, I believe, is our short-term memory. It allows us to forget our problems pretty quickly. Unfortunately, it makes us make the same mistakes again, but I'll take that over the ability to be, to be able to move on and really move forward. So I think look ahead, stop looking back, pass out the rearview mirror, and look forward and keep running.
Thank you for that, Sam. Any questions that might have popped up on our different platforms?
We'll just have some compliments. Jill Hellman, a friend of ours, she says excellent session, and just want to pass on her thanks for a great session. But Abid, what do you think? Should we do the feel-good story? What has everyone gained or learned personally from this period?
Absolutely. We have to end the session on a high note. So any personal stories, any feel-good stories, and maybe we'll start with Ben.
Yes, because I need to leave. I have an appointment that's waiting here. I'm sorry. So thanks for choosing me first. I will say this. I've learned Skype. I've learned Teams. I've learned Zoom. And I can tell you this. For those people who know me and can see me on their screen, it's not that I've been a bad quarantiner. It's this camera adds 10 pounds. Okay?
Well said. I thought I had learned Skype, but this morning failed us. But that's a different story. But thank you for sticking around, and our apologies for starting out a bit late. Over to you, Mark.
A big takeaway for me through this process, and it'll be a shameless advertisement for our National Trade Association, is I have never seen in my whole career how we, in very disparate segments of our industry, whether it be brands, owners, whatever, still manage to stay in a collaborative effort through that association's efforts. And I'm very proud of what they've done and proud to be a member of that organization. And then just a step back, we all have wonderful people that we engage with as peers and business partners. And I'm actually a business partner with my brother in hotels, and he's running a company through very tough times too. And people are staying positive. We will get through this. And I know we're on a process here, and I think the comment just made is a very good one. We'll look back over this in the future and recognize this was just one step on a really positive journey.
Thank you. Well said. And last but certainly not least, Bashar.
I want to harp on my kindness concept, the practice kindness in everything you do. I mean, I've made so many new friends during this time, just out of sort of offering advice, being willing to get on a phone call with someone where I may have thought I'm too important to talk to this person who needs a bit of advice, no matter who they are or what they do. I think kindness at work, kindness at home, kindness to animals, kindness to the planet. I hate to sound, sort of that guy, but I really believe this is what brought us together now, what will help us get through this time. And if we don't let it escape quickly, it will help us recover better and thrive as a society better. So practice kindness in everything you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Bashar. Great discussion. We do have this initiative online, hashtag Hospitality Heroes. Please do recognize the people in our industry, because God only knows it was tough industry to begin with. Going through COVID, it is a very tough time, but we're going to come out stronger. Thanks to our viewers for joining us. Our apologies again for starting a bit late, but I'm glad that our panel made up 10 times for that with their active participation. So thank you for that. Over to you, Sam.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all the, on behalf of the panel and Abid and myself, all the live viewers and also the replay viewers who are watching this episode. Now, if you're on YouTube and you enjoyed what you heard today and you'd like to be notified, just subscribe to our Hospitality Talks channel and press that notification bell, and you'll be then notified when we go live again. Now, if you prefer to watch us on LinkedIn, just follow my personal profile, Sam-Erik Ruttmann, and then you also will be notified when we go live again. So with these few words, I want to thank everyone again for have joined us, and we'll see you in a couple of days again.
Take care, all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.